Hello, I am your host, Kathy Chester, and welcome to the Move It or Lose It podcast, a podcast about all things that move the mind, body, and soul. The Move It or Lose It podcast is for information, awareness, and inspirational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV, so please consult your doctor before making any medical decisions. The views expressed by advertisers, guests, or contributors are their opinions and not necessarily the views of the Move It or Lose It podcast. Hello, so welcome to another episode of our Move It or Lose It podcast. So today we've got a special guest today as we talk about women and intimacy and sexuality with multiple sclerosis. So today I want to welcome our guests. We've got Amanda Thompson, we've got Roxanne Enstrom. I'm going to say it wrong again. Roxanne Enstrom. And I'm going to just say it. Engstrom. Why I would say that wrong. And Julie Stam, which I know that you know from her books and the stuff that she does for MS. So we welcome you guys today. Thank you so much for being our guests. As we talk about a little bit different, I know that I've shared a lot. We've had some podcasts about sexual dysfunction, things like that. We've had women talking about sexual dysfunction with multiple sclerosis. We've had men on. This is a little bit different. We're talking with married women and the issues that come about with multiple sclerosis and how we overcome that and the things that come about with that. So thank you guys for being with us today on Move It or Lose It as we talk about an issue that's not talked about often. And I don't know why, because it is something that is a big issue with multiple sclerosis. So thank you guys for being with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think it's a big issue just in general, not even, we don't talk about enough.
Roxanne, I actually was reading, let's see if I can get back to it, so you're absolutely right. So 43% of women, 31% of men, just in our world, not even MS, have issues with sexual, not just intimacy, but with also sexual dysfunction. Now you take MS and you jump it up to 69%. So it's obviously an issue we know with multiple sclerosis, but it's an issue with our whole world. So to say it's not an issue that anyone deals with is a little bit ridiculous. But we know when we're talking about multiple sclerosis, we know that's an issue that we really struggle with in this particular autoimmune disease. It's something with depression that's way up there, something with suicide and sexual dysfunction. So I'm going to ask you ladies, just why do you think it is? And we're going with women specifically today. So why do you think it is with women specifically?
Roxanne, I can go if you know okay with that. I think it's really more generational too. Like we are similar of age, and I think we were just raised to be people pleasers and not speak up about like what we actually need. And that's in all aspects of life, especially, but it was something to be shameful of if you talked about like sex or it just wasn't the way it's spoken about now. And I feel like the next generation, they explore it's cool to be with different genders and, like all these things that we might have wanted to do, but it was just frowned upon.
Right.
These are things, now it's very fluid, and I think that's beautiful. And I think that's how the world should be. But I think for our generation, it's hard to get past like this. We're not supposed to be talking about this. We're just supposed to, this is the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to enjoy it. And if you don't really talk about it, like, you're not going to be like, oh, let's go, to a shop and buy sex toys, that just,
right.
I was so excited when I was like in my 30s and my girlfriend had like a sex toy party, because like I would never have gone and done that. I would never have just wouldn't have done it. So now I'm like, all right, let's go, Adam,
Right.
It's just a different.
I think you're totally right on that. Unfortunately, I wasted my sex party, my first one, on the wrong husband. But the one that wasn't interested at all. So, but no, I think you're right. Cause I was in my 30s as well, the first time that I went to one. And I know you two are a little bit younger than we are, but it wasn't something that was discussed. You weren't, and it was just like, if you weren't happy, it was like, don't discuss it. Right. So, you just didn't, it wasn't something, and heaven forbid the wife brought it up in therapy. It was like, what'd she say? And I was a pastor's wife, so you did not discuss that. So it was. So what do you guys think?
For me, the issue is more along the lines of like medication interference and like vaginal health in general, right? So, I mean, I'm on Ocrevus as a disease modifying therapy. And if you don't know what that is, it's a B cell depletion therapy. So much more susceptible to infections. I've always been very susceptible to like urinary tract infections. So that's a big issue for me. And then throw on top of that, a lot of people with MS also struggle with like anxiety and depression, which I do. And I take medication for that. And the medication that I take also, you know, it lowers your libido. Right. And I've been on it for 15 plus years. So, and the longer you're on it, the more it decreases. So that's, sorry, my cat. So that's always been like those are my hangups. I think we have a pretty good handle on like communication and being able to talk to each other. But, you know, when you're physically not up for it, or your body is not up for it, that definitely causes an issue.
I think that's so good, Amanda. And it brings me back to, especially being a pastor's wife, and you did not say no. It's like going into the bathroom, getting yourself revved up and trying to do that. And I remember thinking when I didn't know I had MS yet, it was like, I would try, but I'm like, I can't rev myself up. I'm so tired. I'm so whatever. And it just wasn't working. And so it's like you're taught to do these things, but when there's something wrong, it's like I could try to rev myself up and do whatever I could do in the bathroom. I could listen to Beyonce and Rihanna all day, but nothing was helping. It was like, I'm not feeling it. So I think you're right. And without information and being talked to, it's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong. And you immediately feel like it's something wrong with you. So Roxanne, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been married since I was 21, so 22 years. And I think like intimacy is about so much more than sex. And I think like when you talk about some of the, you know, I don't know if you would use this word, but as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, it just feels like, because I've had to, you know, we've gone to sex therapy, I've gone to many types of therapy in my life and had to like pull off the baggage that I have added to my faith or what marriage should be or what sex should be. Like some of those things are false narratives, you know, like for me, like I think God designed sex. Like having pleasure in sex was God's idea. Like the organ that we have is for pleasure, you know, I mean, that's amazing. So I just think that I don't know, I think our society has also reduced sex to like this really low bar of just consent, which obviously, don't mishear me, I think consent is very important, but it's not just about that. It's about like, are we entering in as our full selves? And if I can't be my full self and be with someone, then I don't want to be with them. And my full self comes with, you know, all of the mess and all of the beauty that it comes with. My body changed after I had children. My body continues to change as I figure out I've been diagnosed for 5 years through 4 medication changes. I mean, it is a lot. And so for me, intimacy is also like more about vulnerability and not just about a physical response. But I also recognize I don't have some of, you know, that's why I love everybody's voice on this because everybody's journey is different. You know, and I think like, I haven't had the same reactions to medications. And so I don't have those same challenges, but I have had others, you know, and so we just get to like help. And I think comparison steals joy always, right? Yeah. This is not about like, oh, she's having really good sex and she's really strong. It's not about that. It's about like, what is vulnerability? What is good intimacy to you personally? And then in your marriage, and are you able to show up as your full self and ask for what you want? Because like really, my husband and I always joke, we're like, we're kind of, nerds that got married when we were really young. We've only been with each other, but like, we should be having mind-blowing sex because that was God's intention, So for us, it's about like, but it has to be about vulnerability. And that has changed a lot, since being diagnosed, how I view myself even, right?
Right. Though that's really good. I love that. I think that's so important because we do change with that. And I think it's important to allow ourselves to have that change. And, my husband and I have only been married since 2019. And then the MS took a big change. So it was important to get to know each other. We didn't have a lot of time to get to know each other intimately and sexually before all of a sudden the MS was like, boom, big change. It was like, hey, now we're going to try body mapping. And he was like, okay. So, it was a lot of change quick. So I think when that happens, I'm really grateful that we can begin to talk about things, because without that communication, that really, really is difficult. And I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think that that's a huge, huge issue in our, not just in our community, but because we're talking about multiple sclerosis, I think in our community, it's a big, big issue that there's not that communication. So, what are your thoughts on that, on communication with multiple sclerosis? And do you think it's more difficult for the woman to discuss, for the female to discuss our issues with our partner when it comes to whether it's depression, whether it's wanting to explain what it is that we need in an intimate area? What do you guys think?
I'm sort of an over communicator. So like I'm a Pisces. I've always been like very emotional and open. And so I will talk something to death. And my husband is like, oh. I think I exhaust him sometimes. But communication is definitely like, for sure, super important, because you're not just dealing with the same issues that, any, Sarah and Jane are dealing with. You're adding these extra layers on top with like medications. And I don't know that any of us have the same issue, but like incontinence is a big issue for people with MS.
Did you just throw the cat off? Just
I'm trying to put her on the bed. She's so needy. I'm so sorry.
No, I love it. Go ahead.
So for me, communication hasn't been a huge issue, except for the fact that it just gets exhausting, like trying to not explain, but like over and over say, "Ugh, babe, I have an infection. I'm so sorry." It gets emotionally exhausting, I think, to always be the one that's like, "I'm so sorry, this is going on," or "My fatigue is super bad today." And thankfully, I have an amazing husband who is very intuitive. He's very in tune with me and knows exactly, how he can read me like a book. So I'm super lucky in that way. It's kind of exhausting, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Of course. That makes sense. Julie, what about you?
Yeah, I think communication isn't really the issue for me. It's, like even, Roxanne, as you get older, I just turned 44. Adam's a lot younger than I am. Like we are just at different, I'm perimenopausal now. And so like my body's changed from first having a child and then now this, you're like, what the heck? So like my biggest struggle isn't, I can fake it till I make it, like that I can work out that'll be fine. I could make it work. But sometimes I just have a confidence issue. Like I physically don't want to be naked just because I like can't stand my body at the moment. But I'm also like exhausted and have MS and can't work. Not that I can't work out. I just don't work out. So like there's all those issues that I'm like, okay, so like just get in shape and you'll feel better about it. But our communication, I think we're pretty good at And like, I do set a weekly timer because I don't know that I'll ever like physically be like, I really feel like having sex today, but I set a weekly timer and be like, all right, it's Whip It Wednesday. We're going to figure this out. And like, I think it's important to
I
stay.
love that.
That's awesome, Julie. That, and that's so true because I had good friends that I'm that person that has friends of all ages. I have friends that I go out with that are in their 20s, friends that I'll go out with that are in their 60s. And they had that twice a week that they had it set. And at first I remember being in my 20s thinking, I don't ever want to be that. But now I look at it and think that is so smart. If you need to have that because it's just not there. And it was for her because she just didn't want to, and he did. And he was like, there's something has to change because I love you and I want our marriage to make it, but intimately, I'm not getting what I want. And through therapy, that's what they did. And it changed everything, where I would have thought, wow, that takes all the spontaneity out of it. Like that would be horrible, but it actually saved their marriage.
Oh,
So
and then, like,
everybody's
once you
different.
get started, then we like
Yeah.
a blast, like it's fun.
Right.
And then we're like, okay, everything's good. But I need
Right.
because it's not going to be the forefront of my
Right.
minds. Or
I
if
think
it is,
that's-
like it's a very rare occasion. It's not as often
Right.
as it should be.
And it's
I
really
think,
honest that you shared that.
I think in any relationship too, right? There's like, I've never met a couple that has the exact same desire level.
Right.
So like, let's be real about that. And then like communication about that, right? And understanding like what works for you. I remember, it's so different, right? When I got married, when I was basically a child, and I would be so butthurt that my husband like wouldn't, my love language is like words of affirmation, encouragement. And he just wouldn't do that as much, right? And so fast forward like years later, I feel like this was like 5 years ago. I picked up his phone because it dinged and it said on there, it said, ding, tell Roxanne she's an amazing mother. And I thought, well, what? But in that moment, I felt so loved because this is how much we've grown. I know that that's not how he gives or receives love, but that is how I receive it. So he started changing in order to make sure he was telling me what he already felt. And I could have chosen, right? Some women would look at that and be like, that's so not romantic. That's so this, that's so that. Listen, there's a reason why all fairy tale romance Hollywood stories end when they get together, because staying together is a lot harder. And I just don't think I'm like totally anti the narrative that like, if it's work, that means it's not right. To me, the work that I've put in on my marriage, it's easy to feel like I was a great person before I got married. And then all of my like mess was staring me in the face, because when you get vulnerable and intimate with somebody, it gets messy and you're healing old wounds from your childhood. Things are coming up. I mean, even like your fantasies sometimes are things from your past, like childhood wounds. I mean, there's all kinds of reading. Like when we did sex therapy, it was mind blowing, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I also think like, for me, differentiation is really key in all relationships. So like, what do I expect of my husband, right? Is it his job to make me happy or satisfy me? Or is it my work to figure out what it looks like to show up as a fully embodied, present, vulnerable person who is going to be disappointed sometimes? We are not children that stamp our feet and get our way. And so is he. So like, he can ask for whatever he wants intimately. I can ask for whatever I want. And sometimes that will work out and sometimes it won't. And differentiation in your relationship lets you like move through it, right? Like you're so tied to what the other person owes you or has to give you or has to provide for you. You are always going to be miserable, in my opinion, and I love being married, but I'm my own person and I am responsible like for myself. And I was going to say one thing when Amanda was talking, I thought, man, she must be better at this than me, which she might, because I adore you, Amanda. You're awesome. I sometimes don't even know what my emotions are. So like sometimes, especially post-diagnoses, I was like kind of, there was seething stuff in me. There was stuff bubbling up. There was like pain that was coming out as anger, all these things, right? And it takes a while. I just wanted to say to everybody, all the women listening, like give yourself grace and say to your partner, or even I've had to say to my children, I have learned that it's part of God's journey for my children to understand. I'm going to cry when I say this, but like how hard it is to have a mom with a chronic illness. But I trust that this part of their journey will make them more compassionate. Because sometimes I have to say to them and my husband, I don't know why I feel this way right now or why this is coming out of me. Can you give me some time?
Yeah.
And I'll come back around and I'll apologize and I'll ask for forgiveness and again, that's vulnerability.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't even know why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting. Like when Julie, when you were talking, like after my recent flare up, I really struggled to feel sexy again. And I didn't even know that that was the issue until it was a couple weeks through it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't know. And so like, give ourselves the same grace that we would give other people. This is a life-changing diagnosis that stays with you. And so we have to like, it changes. And then
Yeah.
we grow and learn about ourselves. So anyway, I was just saying like, I
No,
sometimes don't even
Amanda,
know
that's
what I think.
good. Yeah. No, Amanda, 100%. I think that's so well said. I'm trying to remember what you said in the beginning and actually because you went fast, but the last thing you said, I think is so important because I think that there are so many times that we don't know yet and it takes us a while. And I've said that so many times to Lance is that, and the kids is I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but let me just take some time and figure it out because I know I'm not myself right now. I know my emotions are all over and I know I'm snapping. I know I'm not myself and I just need some time to figure out why I'm so emotional right now. And, I appreciate the grace that the kids and that my husband has allowed me to do that because I need that or because I can't express my emotions when I don't understand them yet. And there are times when we don't. I think to jump to an explanation that we don't understand doesn't help us and it doesn't help our family or our spouse. And I think that's a really important thing, like you said, to allow ourselves that. And I'm with you. I can't explain sometimes why intimacy or why I feel bad about myself, why other people can look at me and say, I don't understand. You're beautiful. You're this. I don't understand either. But right now, I may not feel good about myself. I may have lost, like we talked about, a ton of weight during COVID and I felt gross and I didn't want to be touched or looked at. I don't know, why, but there are times we just don't feel good about the way we look or about ourselves.
Well,
And
I think if you had any of our husbands on right now, all they would see is like four beautiful
get
strong
naked.
women.
Yeah.
And like they would literally think all of us are perfect, but inside they don't see what we're fighting. So they don't see
Right.
like every step every day is like left foot up, left foot up, left foot up.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
hands down. Okay, don't drop. Switch to the other side. All right, optic neuritis. I'm driving. Should I pull over? Is
Right.
it fine? Can I do it? Like they don't see the internal monologue that we're all
Yeah.
fighting every single day. So when we're like keeping it together, they can't tell. So that's up to us. To be like,
Absolutely.
okay, today was really shit.
Right.
Like,
Right.
sick,
Yeah.
and there are days that are garbage.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I have progressive MS. And so like each new progression, I'm like, gosh, I just got used to
Yes.
the last thing, like,
Right.
come on, like enough. And you can't help but like be angry and bitter.
Right.
Like it's inside, but we just mask it well. And I feel
Absolutely.
it does
Because
feel
it feels
inauthentic
crazy.
sometimes. Like it feels like we're lying to the ones we love the most because we're not letting them in on it. And then when you do,
Yeah.
you have like that breakdown because you just can't do it anymore. That's when you finally are like, okay, I needed to get that off my chest. But it does take a
Yeah.
minute to get there.
Yeah. Agree. And
Wow,
sometimes it
I think
feels like
that's
it's so
really
much.
profound what Julie just said. Like
Mhm.
it feels like you're lying to the ones who love you the most. I struggle with that because I, in general, am like, I hate when people say you're a toxic positive person. Like, I'm like, what level of positivity is toxic? Now, I am somebody who goes to therapy, talks deeply about pain and struggle and suffering, but I also choose to like believe that nothing in my life is brought for my destruction, right? Like, I
Right.
want to be recklessly hopeful. And it is so hard for me because like talking about my symptoms all the time actually brings me down. Like right now, does everybody need to know that I can't feel my left leg and it's burning? There's nothing anyone can do about that, including me. But I have learned it's not for everyone. It's maybe not the consumption for everyone to know that. Like I don't have to go on, I hang out a lot on Instagram or whatever. I don't have to go on Instagram or TikTok and talk about it every single day. But what I've learned is as I've journeyed with my husband in this, he's like, I do want to know those things. And so especially when I feel I've been very overwhelmed lately with like cognitive confusion, when all four of my kids are talking at once or the kitchen is insane, I get so confused. I feel like I'm in the middle of like a heavy metal concert and people are yelling at me. I'm serious. And I'm a super loud, obnoxious person, you guys. Like my whole life, you know, I'm like, I've blown out speakers in every car I've owned, and I'm way too old to do that because I just love noise. But my MS has changed that, the cognitive. And so I have started to like have to say to my husband, babe, like I need to leave the kitchen. I'm feeling really confused. And
Right.
that's really hard for me because I don't want to
Yes.
be seen as complaining, but that's, you know what, that's also some of the training I received as a woman about not taking up space. Right. And
Yeah.
that was implicit, maybe explicit sometimes, but like we receive some messaging, just like you
Right.
were talking about as a pastor's wife with sex and stuff like that,
Yes.
right? Maybe nobody sat us down and told us that, but like in my life, I was just told like, you shouldn't take up a lot of space. And I'm learning to take up more space, but it's not maybe for everyone. Like it's not public
Right.
consumption, but with my husband, with the people I love the most, with my kids, to be like, I can't do that right now, honey. And like,
Right.
this is why.
Right.
So Julie, you blew my mind. I wrote down. I'm like, I love that, Julie. Thank you.
And Roxanne, I
No,
think
Julie,
it's
that was
amazing
really
that-
good.
Like, I love that you're speaking up about it, but I do know as like a mom with MS that even when we say it, it internally hurts us. Like we
Yeah.
feel like we're letting them in, even though we know we're doing what's best for them, for
Yes.
us. Like just for like going to a party with my son that I know it's going to be water and my feet can't handle it. And, you know, you explain to them like, hey, this isn't going to work for me. I'll be there over there on the side. But while you're sitting on the side, you feel nothing but like sadness and guilt. Even though you
Well,
did the thing, you took
I can tell you this,
That's so hard. Yeah.
having all my kids grown, that if I could have done it different, I would do exactly what you're doing, because all it did for me is take so much of my MS and make it worse, that they're older now and they will say that to me now. I wish you didn't feel that you had to do everything. You didn't have to coach every sport. You didn't have to be at everything. I wish you would have held some things back, because we would have been happy climbing in your bed and telling you all about it. But I felt I had to do everything, coach everything. So take some guilt away, because I've heard it from all three of them. You didn't have to do it all, but I very much felt I did. And I'm very much a go-getter, go after it, do it all and push. And you don't, but it's a feeling that we have. That guilt is strong.
We are
And
such
so-
moms that we went from talking about sex to guilt about our
Oh,
children.
right. See, here we like totally skipped over.
Um,
So, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to do a second half of this. So we're going to stop where we stopped. We're going to come back and go into the next part about our sexual issues and our intimacy. Is what about any other things that we may use, such as toys or any other intimate things that we would go through to help our intimacy with our spouses? So that will be part 2. So we will hold off on the mom issues for a bit and go back to being wives. So that will be part 2. So hold on, guys. I will be back shortly with part 2. So this is part 1 of our intimacy with MS women. So we'll be back. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Move It or Lose It podcast, where you can again find us every Tuesday, and also wherever you like your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Join us on that, and we can't wait to see you again. We're going to have a lot of exciting guests and working together. And as always, you'll hear us say at the end of every podcast, we are stronger together. So let's do it. Let's become stronger together. Have a great day.